Chapter 11. The Darkened House. To everyone's consternation, they found the front door locked. Sam fished around in the geranium pot on the porch and found the spare key. He unlocked the door, letting out a frantic Phoebe, and picking her up, went in and turned on the light. They all stood blinking in the brightness. The house was empty, silent, and there was not, as Sam had expected, an explanatory note on the table. "Let me check my cell," Mrs. October said, pulling her phone out of her pocket. "I had no reception earlier." Jane and Sam watched as she tapped the screen and started to read. Her face tightened as they watched, and when she looked up at them, they knew by her expression that she had bad news. "Sam," she said, "there's a message from your mom. I'm afraid your dad's had a heart attack. She had to call an ambulance to take him to hospital. She says you and Jane are to come and sleep with us, and in the morning she'll let us know what's happening. She says not to phone her. She's in an intensive care unit and not allowed calls, but she'll keep us posted." Sam felt a horrible wave of fear and anxiety swamp him. His father would never go near a doctor, never mind a hospital, unless it was very serious. He treated any ailments that he might have with a foul-smelling ointment called Xantax, which he smeared liberally on any injury, and if he had a cold or flu, on his chest and nose. "The only doctor I need," he would say triumphantly as he walked past, wafting a horribly strong smell of eucalyptus. Sam almost smiled thinking of it, then thought of his father lying in a hospital ICU and felt completely miserable. He wished he could speak to his mother. He felt Jane give his shoulder a pat. "I'll go and fetch our pajamas and toothbrushes," she said. "Can Phoebe come too?" he asked. "Of course she can," Auntie said gently, which made him feel even more strongly that things must be very serious, because he knew she disliked dogs and never usually allowed Phoebe inside the house. By the time the 4 children were settled in the small room Maidie and Peter shared, Jane sleeping top to tail with Maidie and Sam on a mattress on the floor, they all felt too tired to think straight. Mrs. October came in to say good night and turn off the bedside lights. "Just try and sleep now," she said. "Your father's in good hands, Sam. I hope we'll hear more positive news in the morning." Sam lay for a while in the darkness, hugging a thrilled Phoebe. She was usually only allowed on the foot of his bed and got kicked off in the night if she wriggled. She settled to sleep after giving his nose a sloppy lick, but he lay awake for a long time, his mind flicking over the day's events and worrying about what was happening in the hospital. He thought he would never sleep, but eventually exhaustion overcame him and he slipped into merciful oblivion. Sam was woken early by noises in the kitchen. He opened his eyes, saw a strange ceiling, and was totally confused for a second as to his whereabouts. Then the previous night's events flooded over him. He sat up. His father! The other 3 were still sleeping, and he and Phoebe tiptoed through to the kitchen. Mr. October had already left for work, no doubt to sort out the things that his father would usually have been attending to. Mrs. October was making 2 cups of tea and looked up as Sam came in. "Sam, oh good, I was just about to wake you. I want you to eat a good breakfast and then I'm going to take you to the hospital." She was looking at him in a sympathetic way that made him feel very anxious. "How's my father? Have you heard?" Sam asked. His throat felt dry and his voice was scratchy. She didn't answer right away but said, "Come, drink your tea and I'm making you toast and a fried egg." Then she sighed and said, "Your mom says he's not doing too well. The heart attack has damaged his heart quite badly." Sam stared down at his tea, still revolving from Auntie's brisk stirring. He had a lump in his throat. "Come," Auntie said gently, "eat and drink that, then we can be off. Let's aim to be done in 15 minutes, okay?" Sam felt even more anxious. He didn't feel like eating, although the hot sweet tea was welcome, but he could see that Auntie was not going to let him leave her house unfed and unfortified. As he chewed without enthusiasm, he wondered what was happening to his father, so far beyond the healing powers of Xantax. He wished he could take his father to Temenhut. What had the hieroglyph said? There was no illness for those who came to Temenhut the healer, and those that he healed died only when the whiteness came to their hair. The stone! The thought that flashed into Sam's mind was so electrifying that he literally shot out of his chair. He gulped down his tea in large burning swallows and made a sandwich out of the toast and egg. "I just have to get something. I'll be back now," he called through to Auntie, who was splashing in the bathroom. He grabbed a couple of big bites out of his sandwich as he ran, then threw the remainder into the hen coop, to the great excitement of Chicky and his family, who, like Phoebe, preferred human food. He waded quickly into the pond and retrieved the stone from its hiding place, wetting his pajama pants thoroughly in the process. Clenching it tightly in his hand, he ran back to the house. Auntie was still in the bathroom. He went quietly to the bedroom and changed into the clothes he had taken off the evening before, grateful that there was a pocket in the shirt. He slipped the stone into it, and when Auntie came out of the bathroom, went to wash his face and brush his teeth. "Okay, I'm ready," he said 5 minutes later. "Right, let's be off then. I've left a note for the others when they wake up." They bumped slowly along the dirt road which led to the farm. Then, when they hit the tarred road, Auntie put her foot down hard on the accelerator, and they sped towards the hospital, over an hour's drive away. Sam thought of the ambulance which had taken his father along the same route the evening before. Then it had been dark, but now the sun was rising in a lovely mass of pink clouds. His grandfather had always said, "Red at night is a shepherd's delight, but red in the morning is a shepherd's warning." An old English saying which was, come to think of it, totally inappropriate in the dry African Karoo, where a rainstorm would be considered very good weather, and hot, dry days just more of the same. "Sam," Auntie said, breaking into his thoughts. "Yes? You mustn't expect to be able to talk to your father, okay? Your mom told me this morning that he's unconscious, in a kind of semi-coma." "Oh," Sam said in a subdued voice, feeling terribly shocked. He hadn't realized things were that serious. Auntie gave him a worried look and reached over and squeezed his hand. "Be brave for your mother. You need to be there for one another if, and her voice trailed off. Sam nodded. He was beginning to realize that his father's condition was critical and to sense that Auntie did not think he was going to recover. There seemed little to say, and they passed the rest of the drive in silence. The only comfort and hope that he had resided in his shirt pocket. When they finally reached the hospital, Mrs. October drove swiftly to the parking and came to a screeching halt in a bay marked "Visitors." She turned off the engine and clicked her seatbelt, then rummaged in her handbag for her cell phone and typed a swift message. After half a minute, her phone buzzed in reply, and she read it quickly. "Your mom is going to meet us at the main entrance, Sam. Come, we need to hurry." Her face was set and her eyes rather shiny. He unclipped his seatbelt and got out, and they half jogged, half walked to the main entrance. Mrs. Nell arrived at the double entrance doors just as they reached them, and when they slid back, she threw herself at Sam and hugged him wordlessly. Thank you," was all she said to Auntie, and then she turned swiftly and led Sam very fast down a corridor, into a lift, up 5 floors, down another corridor, and left into another which ended in double doors which had big red lettering above reading "Intensive Care Unit." The door was locked, and Sam's mother rang a small bell set on the side, at the same time peering through the glass at the top of the door and waving in a wild way which Sam would have found embarrassing under other circumstances. A nursing sister in a spruce white uniform and large maroon epaulets opened the door and waved them through, giving Sam a nice smile and a "Hello," as his mother pulled him along with her into the ward. 4 beds lay to the right of them, all filled with people who did not move and who seemed to have a horrifying number of tubes and pipes attached to various parts of their bodies. "They gave us a private room," his mother said, pulling him by the hand towards one of 3 open doors to the left, and the unspoken words, "so that he can die in peace," drifted down unsaid between them. They entered, and Sam saw his father lying, surrounded by whiteness. The walls, the bedding, and the half-drawn white curtains around the bed, all were white. Sam didn't like it. Heaven was so often shown in books and movies as being spotless white. It made him feel like his father had already died. His eyes were closed, and he too had several tubes and wires coming from his chest, arm, and hand, and he wore an oxygen mask. A monitor stood to one side with 2 green lines, a blue line, and a purple line running across it. There was a chair on either side of the bed, and Sam and his mother each sat in one and reached over to hold a still hand. Sam stared at his father. His face was a bit obscured by the oxygen mask, but even so he could see that his skin was grey and his face terribly still. He was breathing in a horrible, slow, laboured way, as if each breath was a battle. "Hello, Dad," Sam said loudly, but his father's face remained remote and quiet, beyond hearing and thought. He looked across at his mother. She was staring intently at his father, and her eyes had a horrible, frightened look. Still watching her, he reached slowly into his shirt pocket, took out the stone, and slipped it under his father's hand. He bent his father's fingers over with his own hand, so they were weakly wrapped around the stone, which was resting under his palm. Still holding his hand over his father's, Sam closed his eyes and sent up a prayer, a wish, a supplication, to the sun god Ra, to God, to all the gods mankind had ever prayed to Temenhut the healer, and to the stone. "Please, please make my father well. I wish my father well." He never knew how long he had his eyes closed for, because he used every ounce of will and thought that he possessed to reach the stone while he made the wish. It was like the time travel, only he remained in the same time and place. When he finally opened his eyes, he felt weak with effort. He looked at his father and saw with dismay that he was just the same, grey, still. An awful feeling of despair washed over him. It hadn't worked. He sat up slightly, fighting back tears, then jumped in sudden fright as his father gave a huge gasp which jerked him upright to sitting position before he collapsed back on his pillows, his eyes closed. Mrs. Knowles shot out of a chair and ran to the door, shouting, "Sister, sister!" in a panicked voice, and a nurse came rushing in. "Something's happening," Mrs. Knowles said. "I'm scared that," and her voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The nurse quickly checked the monitors and took Mr. Knowles' pulse. A puzzled expression came over her face. Just then, Mr. Knowles' eyes opened and he saw Sam. A little smile crossed his face. "Sam!" Then his eyes swiveled across the bed to his wife. "Robin, where am I? What's happening?" And he lifted up both his hands and reached out for theirs. After that, there was a lot of explaining and laughing and crying. All the nurses came rushing in, and each could not believe their eyes when they saw Mr. Knowles sitting up and talking completely normally. Each one listened to his heart, took his pulse, checked and rechecked the monitor, and each looked totally flummoxed and said, "It's a miracle." The doctor was called and rushed down from the floor above, and he too could not believe Mr. Knowles' miraculous recovery. "We'll send you for a scan and an ECG, do some blood tests, but I have to say that from what I can see, it's like you have nothing wrong with you. And yet you were in advanced heart failure and, well, it's unexplainable, a miracle." And he shook his head in wonder, adding, "If only this happened more often. Well, let's keep a very close eye on you today and tonight, just to make sure." When his father had reached out for his hand, quick as thought, Sam had snatched up the stone with the other. In the fuss and excitement, no one noticed or heard the "thank you" that he breathed as he dropped it into his pocket. Please join us next week for Chapter 12, The Pyramid in the Desert.